Mosaic, a daily news program from Link TV, presents a selection of news reports from independent and state-controlled broadcasters from throughout the Middle East.
Muslim scholars met in Al-Azhar Mosque in Cairo, confirming the importance of education as a weapon against terrorist ideologies. This comes during a public conference that was held after the Friday prayers in response to an initiative made by the former leader of the national resistance of the Ramadan War in the Suez Canal, Sheikh Hafiz Salama. Salama called on Al-Qaeda in the Greater Syria and the Arabian Peninsula, which calls itself Abdullah Azzam Brigade, to enter into a dialogue.
هذه خطبة اعتيادية وإنما خطبة بها دلالة الزمان والمكان. المكان الجامع الأزهر الذي
This is not a typical sermon. This one has a lot of implications because of its time and place. The place is the Al-Azhar Mosque, where the Egyptians looked when faced with crisis. Time is after the Sharm el-Sheikh terrorist attacks, which created a heavier burden after a series of explosions, including the Taba attacks, Al-Azhar Square explosions, and the Abd al-Mun'im Square explosion in Cairo. This dangerous situation has heightened the importance to exert intensive efforts to find solutions to this new form of terrorism using religious, political, and economic alternatives as well as the security measures. Calls are becoming more vocal to launch a national campaign to bring back the correct form of Islam to the minds of people, starting with religious sermons and dialogue, and to do more than just praying for the souls of the victims. There is a need to acknowledge the presence of a new form of terrorism growing among the new generation must be addressed.
لم نحصن أبناءنا وشبابنا من المراحل الأولى المراحل التعليمية.
We did not equip our children to resist terrorist ideologies during their early education with correct religious teachings. These religious teachings prevent them from deviating from mainstream and from the government and using violence and terrorism. All this is foreign to the principles of Islam.
دعوة في شكل مبادرة من بعض رجال الدين المشهود لهم يريدون التأكيد على أن الإسلام.
Some prominent religious scholars have launched this initiative with the objective of showing that the correct Islam that we know is not what was invented by these deviants who even deviate from human nature. Considering that the government only use security alternatives, some officials can be held responsible for what is happening, including the birth of these groups and the recklessness of the way of handling them. The government even failed to utilize religious decrees that were issued by Egyptian religious organizations during the 1990s aimed at decreasing the level of resentment and eliminating the sources of terrorism through dialogue. This call stems from a pessimistic, bloody, and destructive reality which forced these Islamic leaders to step on their pride by acknowledging the presence of a real problem reflected in the deviation of some young Muslims from the mainstream. The objective is to convince the government to stop dealing with terrorism only as a security issue.
Considering this only as a security issue and rejecting altogether any political solution creates a situation of action and reaction between security forces in some Islamic groups and some neo-Islamists. The situation will not change and there will be no end in sight.
Many believe that the ideal solution is to contain the problem, but not to ignore it. This is the main idea behind considering reasonable solutions to manage the crisis. Reluctantly, Muslim leaders acknowledge the presence of a problem that has to be dealt with. Hani Amara, Abu Dhabi Television, Cairo.
أمر صاحب السمو الشيخ خليفة بن زايد الهيان رئيس دولة الإمارات العربية المتحدة ببناء مدينة.
The President of the United Arab Emirates, Crown Prince Sheikh Khalifa bin Zayed Al Nahyan, has pledged $100 million to the Palestinians to build a residential town in place of the Israeli settlements that will be demolished after the pullout from Gaza. The pledge provided a great degree of comfort and gratitude among Palestinians.
It is a great gesture by the President of the United Arab Emirates, Crown Prince Khalifa bin Zayed Al Nahyan, who donated $100 million for the construction of a complete residential town on the sites of Israeli settlements, which will be destroyed after the withdrawal. It is a gift from the Crown Prince to the Palestinian people. The plan is to build an entire town containing 3,000 residential units and will be named after the Crown Prince Khalifa bin Zayed. It is located in the southern Gaza Strip.
We at the Ministry of Housing extend our heartfelt appreciation to the President of the United Arab Emirates, Crown Prince Khalifa bin Zayed, for his great gesture. Our brothers in the United Arab Emirates always deliver on their promises and never back off from any pledge made to the Palestinians. Moreover, they always stand behind the Palestinians, especially during rough times.
The proposed town will relieve the housing crisis in the Gaza Strip. It will provide houses to some 30,000 poor and needy people and to those whose houses were demolished by the Israeli army.
We thank the government and the people of the United Arab Emirates for their pledge that will help the poor and needy Palestinians.
During the Palestinian uprising, many people lost their homes and they are in dire need for places to live. They need to live like other people do in the world. The Palestinians are the most oppressed people in the world and they could use the help.
It is a 100% patriotic gesture from the people of the United Arab Emirates, and the Palestinians are always indebted.
The Crown Prince Khalifa bin Zayed gave instructions to the Department of Municipality and Agriculture to execute this project in coordination with the United Nations Relief and Workers Agency, UNRWA. The Department of Municipality will work in conjunction with the Palestinian Authority to distribute the units to the needy under the auspices of the Emirates Friendly Association. This pledge from the Crown Prince is an extension of the ongoing and unlimited generosity of the Emirates to the Palestinians. Such support enhances the resilience of the Palestinians on their own land.
Hello and welcome. The Parliament was due to resume debate this afternoon on the new government of Prime Minister-elect Fouad Siniora ahead of a confidence vote. Some 20 MPs still want to contribute to the debate when it resumes at 6 p.m. The new government yesterday defended the right of Hezbollah to resist Israel and pledged solid ties with Syria. More on yesterday's session in this report. The government, the first to be formed since Syria withdrew its troops in April, is expected to win the vote after the debate, which is to end this evening with more than 30 out of 128 deputies scheduled to speak. Prime Minister-elect Fouad Siniora said yesterday his cabinet would respect international law, but did not mention UN Resolution 1559, which forced Syria to end its 29-year military presence and demands all militias in the country to disarm. Siniora said the government would defend Lebanon's rights to resistance, referring to Hezbollah, which helped end Israel's 22-year occupation of South Lebanon in May 2000. He told the parliament, quote, "The government considers the resistance a natural and honest expression of the Lebanese people's national rights to liberate their land and defend their honor against Israeli aggression and threats." Siniora added the government affirms its respect for international law, good ties to international legitimacy, and respect for its resolution within the framework of sovereignty, solidarity, and national unity. Hezbollah was the only Lebanese group to keep its arms after the 1975 to 1990 civil war. Washington brands the Shiite Muslim group a terrorist and wants it disarmed, a policy reiterated by U.S. Secretary of State Condoleezza Rice during a visit to Beirut last week. Hezbollah has a ministerial post for the first time. The new cabinet's lineup includes 15 ministers allied to anti-Syrian bloc led by son of slain former Prime Minister Rafiq Hariri, MP Saad, and 5 loyal to the pro-Syrian Shiite coalition that includes Hezbollah. It also includes 3 ministers loyal to pro-Syrian President Emil Lahoud and 1 independent. But it excludes supports of Michel Aoun, a foe of Syria who heads the Free Patriotic Movement in parliament. Aoun says his bloc would spearhead parliamentary opposition to the government. The former general told the assembly the new government must demarcate Lebanon's border to avoid any disputes. Hezbollah often clashes with Israeli troops in the Sheba Farms, a border area Beirut and Damascus say is Lebanese soil, still occupied by Israel. The United Nations says Israel's withdrawal from Lebanon is complete and Sheba is Israeli-held Syrian land. Han also asked the government to specify the term under which Hezbollah might eventually hand its arms to the state. Beyond the thorny Hezbollah issue, Sinora must also convince investors that Lebanon maintains security without Syrian troops after a spate of bombings and assassinations.
Prime Minister Ariel Sharon is in Paris for talks with French President Jacques Chirac. The two leaders spoke about the Gaza disengagement, disarming Hezbollah, the Iranian nuclear threat, and the growing danger from international terror. IBA's Aaron Viner has more in this report.
Prime Minister Sharon was the luncheon guest of French President Jacques Chirac at the Élysée Palace outside Paris. Sharon thanked Chirac for his fight against anti-Semitism in France, while Chirac praised Sharon for his determined battle against terror. Chirac added that the Prime Minister's disengagement plan is a historic opportunity to promote peace in the region. He added that all sides should return to the roadmap following the withdrawal so that Israel can exist in peace and the Palestinians can create a sustainable state. This is Sharon's first official state visit to France in 4 years. His last scheduled visit was cancelled after he encouraged French Jews to immigrate to Israel. But relations have thawed since then, and the Prime Minister was greeted warmly by Chirac today. Most observers see this trip as a boost for both Sharon and Chirac. France is anxious to reclaim its role as Mideast peace broker ahead of the French elections. Sharon is interested in earning diplomatic credit for his disengagement plan. He is also reported to be seeking French support for the international fight against terrorism. Aside from the disengagement, the two leaders also discussed the Syrian withdrawal from Lebanon, disarmament of Hezbollah, and the Iranian nuclear threat. Last night, hundreds of protesters took to the Parisian streets to demonstrate against the Prime Minister's visit. Chirac is expected to be the last world leader to meet with Sharon prior to the scheduled disengagement from Gaza. This is Aaron Viner for IBA News.
Defense Minister Shaul Mofaz has put on hold a planned trip to Washington to sort out a dispute with the Pentagon over the sale of Israeli military hardware to China. This according to the Haaretz newspaper. The Pentagon began restricting weapons sales to Israel when it learned of the Jerusalem-Beijing deal, which it claims violates U.S. defense regulations. At the time, Foreign Minister Silvan Shalom apologized for the incident, but the Bush administration is insisting Mofaz sign a letter of apology and the Knesset pass legislation tightening military exports. The U.S. Settlement Council today announced plans for a new mass protest march to Gush Katif. The demonstration, set to begin next Tuesday from 3 western Negev towns, is an attempt to stymie police and IDF efforts to bar right-wing activists from reaching the Gaza Strip. Sderot's Mayor Eli Moyal said today that his Qassam-ridden municipality is happy to host the mass anti-pullout rally. The mayor of the Negev town said Sderot and Gush Katif are one and the same. U.S. Council heads expect 50,000 people to attend the demonstration, which they hope will foil efforts to evacuate the 8,000 settlers from Gaza. Head of Gush Etzion Regional Council, Shaul Goldstein, told Israel Television's Moshe Gertel that he hopes the march will change public opinion and bring about new elections.
We don't think that the march itself will stop it, but we do believe that we have a right to protest. And this right is a common right in all democracies around the world, and we do believe that marching towards Gush Katif and protesting the way we protested last week will cause the public opinion in Israel to change dramatically and support our struggle. We hope someone will listen to it and will go to new elections, but because we do believe that what happened last week, stopping our buses along the way from the Netivot, preventing for our people to come to the demonstration. I think these steps undermine the democracy in Israel. People here understand it, and in the near future, we hope they will make such a noise that the government has to go to new elections.
A suicide bomber blew himself up among a group of Iraqi army recruits in northern Iraq today, killing 25 people and wounding 35. Police said that the attack occurred outside a municipal building in Rabia, a town 80 kilometers northwest of Mosul. Meanwhile, 2 U.S. Marines were killed in clashes with the Iraq insurgents near the Euphrates Valley town of Haditha, while a soldier died in Baghdad road accident. The military announced today that the Marines were killed yesterday when their unit came under attacks by small arms fire and rocket-propelled grenades. They died in the same operation in which 9 suspects insurgents were killed when U.S. warplanes bombed buildings in Saikla near Haditha. The soldier died in a vehicle accident late yesterday. In another incident, a car bomb exploded near a U.S. military convoy in the central Iraqi city of Ramadi, setting 2 vehicles on fire. It remains unclear whether there are any casualties. Also today, an improvised explosive device apparently targeting a U.S. convoy went off on a highway in the Al-Khadra neighborhood of Baghdad. Armed police raided an apartment block today in West London's Notting Hill area seeking suspects in the July 21st failed bombings against the capital's transit system. They were involved in at least one standoff with a man in an apartment pointing assault weapons and pistol at the home. Police wearing black balaclavas and body armor surrounded the building. Sky News reported a series of explosions, possibly from stun grenades at the apartment block. Britain's Press Association reported that police had made a number of arrests in the operation being carried out at least 2 locations in Notting Hill. Witnesses said they heard at least 1 large explosion and said heavily armed police were seen in the area, some wearing gas masks while others wearing forensic suits.
The attacks in Sharm el-Sheikh have left behind a trail of destruction and shattered lives. But despite the damage, some tourists are determined to stay. More with Nile TV's Shahira Amin.
A day after 3 explosions ripped through Sharm el-Sheikh, leaving scores dead and hundreds injured, residents of this Red Sea resort are trying to come to terms with what has happened. The blasts that have left behind a trail of destruction have also shattered their lives, they tell us.
أنا خلاص كده كل الناس كل شباب المصري اللي هنا خلاص كده أكل عيش وطعم من هنا ومش عارف هيلاقي إيه.
وخصوصا يعني هنا الشرم يعني بلد الأمن والأمان والسلام وكده فحدش كان متوقع كده أبدا يعني.
As rescuers and aid workers continue to remove all traces of the destruction, streets and beaches teeming with holiday makers just a day earlier are now almost completely deserted. Many of the tourists have decided to stay indoors for fear of further attacks. Only a few brave ones are determined to carry on with their holidays, even though the mood has now been dampened.
I think we've decided to stay on. Yeah. Only because we've just started a holiday, and for me, it's happening in London as well, so it makes no difference where I am really.
We will stay here, yes, it's nice, but yeah. This can also happen in Holland.
It's a big world, and a few bombs here or there, you know, we have to get on with it. In the great, 2 world wars, millions die. Children are dying every 3 seconds in Africa. A few bombs,
The old market, usually thronged with shoppers at this hour, is now quiet, save for the sound of Quranic verses, a sign of mourning and respect for the dead. This vendor says it'll take time for things to return to normal here. Those who carried out the attacks have no religion. They deserve to be punished by God, he says. At the nearby Sharm el-Sheikh hospital, many of the injured echo his words. May God punish those behind the cowardly acts, says Mohammed, who has a fractured hip and shrapnel wounds. He tells us he is determined to stay on in Sharm el-Sheikh despite the attacks. Like many of the city's residents, he had left his village seeking a better livelihood here. Outside in the corridor, a doctor reviews the patient's medical records. The lucky ones, like Mohammed, will be fit enough to leave in a matter of days. Some will not be quite so fortunate.
horror and devastation. A paradise resort turned into rubble in a matter of seconds. But the residents of Sharm el-Sheikh are determined to carry on with their business and their lives. The terrorists, they say, won't succeed in wreaking havoc here. Shahira Amin, Nile TV International, Sharm el-Sheikh.
Pakistani President Pervez Musharraf, a key ally in the US-led war on terror, has ordered a new crackdown on militants. The move came after revelations that 3 of the 4 London bombers were British Muslims of Pakistani descent who visited Pakistan before the attacks. Stung into action by Pakistani connections with the July 7th attacks on London, security forces have detained close to 300 people. There were also more overnight raids on private homes and controversial Islamic religious schools known as madrasas. Here's the full story. In the last 24 hours in Pakistan's southern port city of Karachi, 60 students, clerics and other suspects have been detained after police raids. All of them allegedly belong to banned militant organizations. Another 40 people were detained in Peshawar, 42 in Quetta, 30 in the central city of Multan and some other cities in the Punjab province. Western powers are showing impatience with Pakistan's failure to curb extremist madrasas, but these can be hard to find among thousands of bona fide religious schools. Some Pakistanis who have their doubts about those seminaries which are being run by militant outfits believe the action is timely.
If there are actually madrasas which are providing training in terrorism, then these ought to be finished. There should be peace. There should be calm.
The children who enter madrasas are very young. If they are trained or if they are taught at a very young age that they would serve Islam by strapping bombs to their bodies and blowing themselves up, they will obviously do that. They will follow whatever they are told.
Most people in Karachi have reacted positively to President Musharraf's call for jihad or holy war on hate preachers and terror. The president spoke just hours after 4 small coordinated explosions jolted London again. The blasts were 2 weeks to the day since 4 explosions on London's transport system killed 56 people. Ali, a young salesman, said the speech counteracted a negative image of Islam across the globe.
President Pervez Musharraf's address was very good. He has delivered a very good speech providing support to the falling image of Islam. He delivered a pro-Islam speech. He was very right at saying that whatever is going on, it has never been the concept of jihad, whereas Islam is the religion of peace.
Salim Akhtar, a school teacher, said applying force on religious schools might ignite emotions.
I think it is a reaction to whatever is going on in Iraq and Afghanistan. It is the emotion of Muslims, but suicide attacks are wrong because Islam prohibits from taking life of innocent people. But if they say they will forcibly close down the religious institutions, which are the forts of Islam, it will be of no help to stop terrorism, rather accelerate it. It will shoot up emotions.
President Musharraf said all madrasas would have to register with authorities by December. He also called for the schools to be reorientated towards a modern education. Under these plans, banned militant groups would not be allowed to reorganize under new names or to raise funds. Keeping unauthorized arms would be strictly prohibited, and action would be taken against literature designed to spread hatred. Pakistan's main Islamist parties have attended protests across the country today. They're demonstrating against the sweeping crackdown on suspected Islamic militants. Meanwhile, clerics in Karachi have condemned raids on Islamic schools, demanding the government stop what they call harassing Islamists.
The incident takes place in London and the sufferer is Pakistan. Even London has not made such a number of arrests, which Pakistan has made. What are we being being punished for. The accused who is being blamed for staying in a Pakistani madrasa for a week, and actually the school is being held responsible. Please think, for God's sake, about the country where he stayed for 22 years and received education from institutions for about 15 or 16 years. Why aren't those institutions guilty?
Police in Pakistan have yet to arrest anyone who has a direct link to the London bombings.
وإلى المغرب حيث أصدرت السلطات المغربية قوانين جديدة في إطار مكافحتها للإرهاب.
The Moroccan government drafted new laws regarding its war on drugs and terrorism. The new laws include the reduction in the size of land used for growing marijuana and the request for Europe's assistance in transforming the hashish plantations into other agricultural farms. On these valleys and mountains, plantations of marijuana are on the rise. It is the plant where hashish and kef are extracted. Here in this countryside, more than 120,000 hectares are used to produce this drug. 96,000 family units live in this area where the average median income does not exceed $3,000. In comparison, the proceeds for the trade of the Moroccan hashish by some European networks exceeds $10 billion US. Allegedly, portion of the proceeds are being used to fund and support some terrorist organizations.
الإجرامية والإرهابية كتلجأ لتجارة المخدرات لتمويل الأنشطة ديالها.
Some criminal and terrorist organizations use the trade of drugs to fund their operation and activities. To win the war on terror networks, we must fight drug cartels and swiftly crack down on drug traffickers.
The marijuana farmers are voicing their own opinions, confirming that drugs don't kill, but hunger does. Morocco accounts for 90% of all marijuana exports to Europe. However, the Moroccan capital is now drafting new laws to cut down on the use of large areas for growing marijuana. Instead, farmers are encouraged to plant other agricultural crops in these areas. The question is, what kinds of other crops?
Growing marijuana is not the fault of Moroccan peasants and farmers. They rely on these plants as a way of supporting their families. The plantation of hashish is the outcome of poverty.
According to Moroccan officials, the destruction of marijuana plantations will not only cut down on the production of hashish and kef, but it will also prevent any further negative effects on the environment. Over the past 30 years, Morocco lost more than 40% of its forests for marijuana plantations. Through the United Nations Office for Counterterrorism and Crimes, officials at Rabat are bidding on Europe's support and on the help of the international community in their war against drugs and terrorism, a scenario that is similar to the tale of a man who owns a cow, however, others benefit from its milk. Morocco is suffering locally and internationally due to the negative image of being a marijuana producer, whereas Europe is reaping the financial profits of such thriving trade. Therefore, Rabat is entitled to financial help and technical support from the European Union in the fight against the phenomenon. Ali Khala, Al-Alam, Al-Rabat.
The views expressed on Mosaic are not those of Link TV or its sponsors, but of the broadcasters themselves. Mosaic is made possible by a grant from the John S. and James L. Knight Foundation, which promotes journalism excellence worldwide and invests in the vitality of 26 U.S. communities, and the William and Flora Hewlett Foundation. Additional support is provided by the Firedoll Foundation and Henry and Virgilia Dakin.